Josephhunter, PD4, Creating Future Experiences. The project began with me, Gloria, Jacob, Maya, and Lisa researching population health through a biological lens. Creating CPIC cards on a Miro board, my focuses were on multi-species environments, apparel for disability, and biomaterial development. One card that stood out was a project by Climavore. They created a multi-species space for aquatic life and human life, provoking new thought around our relationship with nature. We decided to take this thinking forward into the And Then workshop with Lewis Chuss, conducting role play, mapping out health dialogues within multi-species environments. We ended the workshop visualizing the semantics around this topic, going down a route of community health through reframing our relationship with nature. We began to create our narrative, starting with a community centre that embodied our research direction. The Glencoe Nature Symbiosis and Rehabilitation Centre. Moment. A new community centre is set up deep in the hills of Glencoe with the intent to be a beacon of resistance and symbiosis, a place where human, animal, plant coexist and learn from each other. With the new government mandates in place, community hubs have become the lifeline of society, where water, energy, and knowledge can be shared efficiently with the overarching ideology of symbiotic life. Communities like this begin to redefine our relationship with nature. Increasing floods, heat waves, and rising sea levels have escalated our climate crisis. New government mandates have restricted our consumerist freedom, rationing high carbon food items, capping material purchases, and restricting energy use. People are beginning to migrate out of lowland cities. Norms shift against companies who still have unsustainable practices as intergenerational tensions arise when the youth begin to hold their elders accountable. A need to rethink our relationship with the earth has become imperative. Going into our first expert session, we rebranded the visuals of the center to give it more identity. We made persona cards and encouraged the experts to roleplay as stakeholders within our narrative. This was received well. They highlighted the intricate systems of government roles and the issues and opportunities that this future could hold surrounding societal mental health. Following on, we made a stakeholders map and personas to fit. We began adding these personas to departments within the community centre, as well as building a timeline to gain some perspective on how the programme would come about. We then defined our branding through a colour palette, font, and general aesthetics, and created a publication to further communicate the world we had started to build. We used photos I took of the Highlands in black and white to create serious overtones, paired with a colour palette of pink and red to give a nurturing feel. Jacob made a map, I wrote an origin story, Maya wrote the manifesto, and Lisa and Gloria created a notice and program board. Finally, I made a staff page using the personas we created earlier. We wanted to back up our narrative of climate migration with real world data, so I collated this from the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency's webpage, showing the risk of river and coastal flooding in 2080. For our peer review, we collected props to help with our storytelling, proposing that the centre could become an archive for lost culture. This review brought a big shift in our direction. It was highlighted to us that we were trying to tackle too many themes, and so made an effort to refine our narrative to something more digestible. It was also brought to our attention that the location didn't make sense, and should really be situated in cities where people will be affected the most. Realising our logo was similar to the British Red Cross, we decided to rebrand as the Scottish Resilience Programme, an extension of the British Red Cross, acting in a similar manner but seeking to aid and support migrants from within the UK and abroad who are struggling with the loss of their homes, culture, or heritage. Still anchored by community resilience, but now focusing on the crisis areas, envisioning a third space for people in this transition period. 2035. Rising sea levels are causing flash floods and coastal flooding in the region of Scotland, leading to the erosion of urban infrastructure and environmental degradation in lowland areas. Following this climate crisis, a pilot for a government-initiated program is being trialled in Leith to tackle the ongoing struggles surrounding micro and macro climate migrations, focusing on the increasing deterioration of mental health surrounding the loss of homes, culture, tradition, and resources. We then went on to recreate our personas and timeline with our new narrative, using Leith as a case study as it has particularly worrying statistics for flooding, visualizing our data with images, and creating a map of our relief tent, dividing it into three sectors: culture preservation, data and relocation, and emergency third space. We then researched different communities and loss and began to redesign our publication. To further our user interaction, we began to think of our publication as a web page that would allow migrants to find out more about our program. But arose the question, how would they find it? So we created a poster campaign that could be put in points of entry or travel locations that were easy to relate to if English wasn't your native language, combining it with a discrete NFC tag placed elsewhere so people could scan it subtly. Finalizing part one of this project, we drew up our exhibition space and I began to map out the themes of our narrative into potential opportunities. Part two. Beginning part two with Zoe's workshop, we built links between government, health, personas, and non-human to get an idea of how they link with each other. I created a scenario from this involving a climate migrant from the Western Isles who'd lost their home and culture to rising sea levels. The design opportunity was a workshop where users could bring an artifact from their heritage, in this case tweed, in order to immortalize and celebrate their culture through a wearable, incorporating our brand colours to give them a sense of acceptance in a new community. Taking the theme of loss and migration forward, I found some inspiring projects and tried to project them into 2035. My perspective changed after finding this video on Dezeen. These panelists urge people to shift their perspective on migration, touching on the fact that people have been migrating for millennia. The problematic nature of modern migration is down to our temporary handling of migrants and refugees in poorly designed camps. This led me to start researching community integration. These two examples portrayed the approach I wanted to take with the direction of my individual work. I went on to envision how this approach would look in our relief tent. What are migrants' immediate needs on arrival to integrate successfully? Imagining a kit for the staff and migrants to use to ease this process. I concluded that language support was a major concern for migrants or refugees that don't speak the native language. So I began to envisage a kit that could translate for them seamlessly. I wanted to do this through a medium that anyone could understand. So I decided to embody it in a tea set, as I feel tea is something anyone from any culture can relate to, allowing non-native speaking migrants access to mental health support. So I looked into a variety of tea cultures from around the world, including Britain's problematic relationship with it, bringing up the question, what if English breakfast tea was made in England? This prompted a memory of the plant fireweed that my tutor Deirdre had told me about, as it blooms in disaster-struck areas and also is used in tea brewing, touching on the material scarcity of a climate crisis future and themes of resilience. So I took the idea to the workshop and created a prototype for testing, naming it the Tea and Talk Kit. The design felt intuitive and people reacted to it well, but it needed more research and systemic design within our narrative. Conducting some research with help from Maya, as we were looking into similar topics, I found some key data on my demographic from the Migration Observatory. Preparing for our next expert session, I made a storyboard identifying how someone would find our program. Expert Session 2. This session was helpful in highlighting the challenges like migrant safety in community spaces and opportunities in my project, like removing stigma from healthcare through the humility of tea. Following advice from the expert session, I made a user journey highlighting where my project would lie in our program. Wanting some research to back up the tech I was proposing, I looked into the current work being done for speech-to-speech translation, and it's promising, but not yet fluid enough for organic conversation. I made a semantic palette to begin iterating on my T-box idea. I wanted it to be inspired by a variety of cultures, but also to stay neutral in an attempt to foster any user into its embodiment of a new community. Inspired by the traditional Japanese tea caddy, I started ideating on the tea box's form. I began mapping the idea to understand where the components fit in and where it needed work. This is when I thought a tone of voice detection element would make sense, given that the counselor or support worker conducting the session would be hearing an automated voice instead of a real one. This would allow them to receive psychological data through AI detection. I wanted to further explore the user journey from start to finish, ideating on how they find it through a booking and location webpage, as well as the ritualistic experience of using each element of the kit from a migrant's perspective and a counselor's perspective. I then started a form exploration for the teacups and for the earpieces. At this point, I felt ready to start fabricating the idea, beginning with the box as it would give me some frame of reference for the scale and semantics. I took the Japanese tea caddy design forward as the cross ribbon design is reminiscent of our logo and of my first prototype, as well as bamboo fitting my narrative of material scarcity being a very regenerative material. I wanted to explore this material theme further as I felt it fit our narrative. With our program being a response to the future climate crisis, it felt right to propose sustainable materials. For the lid of the box, I wanted to propose a biomaterial made from scallop shells, as we had used one in our exhibition as an artifact someone had brought from their beach town home lost to rising sea levels. The scallop shell is a symbol of fertility and birth too, so it felt like it encompassed my ideology well. The lid was made from jesmonite with crushed scallop shells as an aggregate to resemble a biomaterial. I then began testing the box with props, including a microphone as one of the objects. Then I developed a bone conduction earpiece, using poly pellets to hold a flexible U shape that could be bended onto the ear without entering the ear canal. I wanted the microphone to feel ritualistic like the other objects, but also separate, so I decided to add some tech waste into the bottom to give it a futuristic feel. To finalize my voice detection implementation, I researched the current tech and found what data is being collected currently for this kind of technology. I then used it to make this prop screen with the help of AI. Adding in a conversation I recorded from two of my friends is an example of how this kind of technology would work in this situation. To help the communication of the box, I made a recognizable logo from the fireweed plant, as I feel it embodies the project well, and I envisioned it being a symbol for migrants to look out for to find safe spaces where they can find this aid in a subtle way that doesn't attract too much attention. I wanted to add a graphical element to the box that could prompt the users into conversation about their story, as well as instruct them on how to use it without using any English on the pamphlet. So I added a subtle graphic on one side of the spice route from Indonesia to Italy, hinting at travel and tea spice, with the other side portraying people interacting and using the kit. Finally, I made the cups from terracotta air drying clay, in homage to Indian and Japanese teacups. And I purchased 2 red tins to house the loose leaf tea and earpieces. Here's the shoot I did with the help of Carl, Maya, and Fraser, where I gained some shots and video of people using it in a community space. Here is the video for you now. In conclusion, I really enjoyed the outcome of this project, from the depth of research we conducted as a group to the insight I gained on migrant life and new technologies in my individual work. In reflection, I wish I had done some more personal research, reaching out to migrants themselves, but given the length of the project, I decided to prioritize the ideation. I think the physicality of the object came across well, but it would have been nice to delve into the tech interaction and legacy of my project within the program we created. This has been Tea Talks by Josephhunter. Thank you for listening.